And welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Jesse with Connects High Performance, and today I want to talk to you about a very important topic. Now, I hope you guys pay attention because this topic can mean the difference between a long and productive career and maybe not even getting a career started. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about general physical preparedness, or GPP. So what is GPP? Well, it's the competency of your body to perform tasks and activities. And those tasks and activities tend to be in the space of general health and fitness and sport performance. Okay, so who should train for GPP? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's the people that have not worked out in a long time, or even people that are just trying to get into working out. We need to take it slow with these people. You can't go from nothing at all into a high intensity style of program and expect your body to perform well or even not get injured. And what most people don't realize is that athletes, and I'm talking about athletes of all ages, the little guys all the way up to the professional ranks, these guys need general physical preparedness just as much as anybody. And in fact, there can be an argument made that high-level professional athletes need more GPP than the guy that just got off the couch and looking to start a new workout routine. Okay, so what are we training for specifically? Well, simply put, we're trying to increase the work capacity of the body. And we do that by increasing tissue resilience, building up muscular strength, building up muscular endurance, building up cardiovascular endurance. We also want to build up mobility and flexibility. Now, establishing a good base of these qualities will better prepare us for the higher intensity training that we're going to have for our tasks or specific sports in the future. So let's talk about building tissue resiliency. So in physiology, we have Davis's law. Now, that law states that our tissue will adapt to the demands imposed upon it. Now, what that means is if you're a kid carrying a heavy backpack to school every day, at the end of the school year, your tissue is going to be a lot stronger because you were carrying an external load. However, when summer comes around and you put that backpack away, if you don't get outside, if you don't go play any sports, and all you do is go sit in your room and play video games, your body's going to adapt to that stimulus and it's going to get weaker. And we don't want to get weaker. So what do we do to keep them from getting weak? Well, easy answer, we work out. Now, the cool thing is when you work out, muscle tissue can respond to training within the first couple of days up to a couple of weeks. The problem we have is muscle tendons strengthen a lot slower. Now, in fact, tendons can take up to 3 months before we see any kind of change out of them when we start new weight training routines. Now, this can be problematic because little Jimmy's going to want to go to the gym and get stronger. So what he's going to do is he's going to go start bench pressing 95 pounds. It's going to feel pretty good. First couple of days, muscle tissue adapts, gets a little bit stronger. So next session, he's going to think, wow, I'm going 135. Doing a session, feeling pretty good. Bench pressing 135, no problem. Chest muscles, they start to adapt. They get stronger. Goes home, comes back to the gym, feeling really good. Now he's doing 185 because his muscles really adapted to the stimulus. He's been working hard. Now he goes home. Next session, little Jimmy is now Big Jimmy. Big Jimmy says, I'm going to do 225. Big Jimmy starts bench pressing 225. No problem for the muscles. But guess what? After the session, he starts to feel some pain. Every session, he starts to bench press. He feels irritated in the shoulders. Now, what's happening there? Well, the muscle tissue did a great job of adapting to the stimulus. But again, muscle tendon, that strengthens at a much slower rate than muscle tissue. So now, Big Jimmy is benching. His muscles are stagnating because the muscle tendons are inflamed. They are in pain. He can't get any more work done. Okay, so how do we train tendons? It's a little bit different than training muscle tissue. Tendons respond really well to isometric exercises. Now, the loads we'll need are going to be close to 80% of your 1 rep max. And in fact, some studies show that young, healthy adults require about 90% of their 1 rep max to create adaptations in the tendons. You also want to train your tendons at a full range of motion. Your tendons are exposed to massive amounts of forces. For example, during walking, tendons can be subjected to forces equivalent to 2.7 to 4 times body weight. For running, they can be subjected to forces equivalent to 4 to 8 times body weight. We definitely want to work full range of motion because resiliency at end ranges dramatically decreases the chances for injuries. We want to also build up bone strength. For soft tissue, we have Davis's law. For bone strength, we have Wolff's law. Basically, your bones will adapt to the stresses placed upon them. So how do we strengthen bone? Pretty simple, actually. Weight-bearing exercises. This can include hopping or jumps, but the best way to do it is obviously resistance training. Let's move on to increasing muscular strength. Now, we could spend an entire video on this one, but for the purpose of general physical preparedness, let's just stick to the basics. When I talk about basics, I'm talking about the basic movement patterns. We're talking about a squat pattern, a hinge pattern, a push pattern, a pull pattern, a rotational pattern, and locomotion. Now, depending on where you read, there might be a couple of more, but these ones in general are the ones you want to stick with if you are training for GPP. Now, for strength, we're going to want to stick with moderate loads. We're talking about 70 to 85% of your 1 rep max. This equates to about 6 to 12 repetitions per set. And because it is GPP, we want to stick to a full range of motion throughout our lifts. I do want to note that there are some scenarios where full range of motion isn't really necessary and it can actually be counterproductive to what your goal is. But because this is for GPP, I want you guys to stick with a full range of motion every time. Now, I would also recommend utilizing all 3 phases of the contraction. We're talking about the concentric action, which is the positive, eccentric contraction, which is the negative, and then also the isometric, the same isometrics that we use for tendon strengthening. And the reason why I want you to utilize all 3 is because they will enhance your coordination, your proprioception, and your overall motor control. So let's talk about increasing your muscular endurance. Now, what is muscular endurance? Well, it's basically how long can your muscles continue performing the task. This is related to time under tension. Typically, we're talking about lighter loads but higher reps. Try not to go over 70% of your 1 rep max, and at minimum do 12 repetitions per set if you're trying to increase your muscular endurance. Ultimately, all we're trying to do is match the eventual task requirement for endurance. Let's talk about cardiovascular endurance. This is often referred to as aerobic fitness. Now, for the purposes of GPP, you're going to want to stick with cardiovascular zone 2, which is about 70% of your maximum heart rate. You can think about this as a brisk walk. Do it about 2 to 4 times a week, 20 to 30 minutes per session. Now, as you advance, then you can start training in cardiovascular zone 3, which is about 80% of your maximum heart rate. Here, you're going to want to start incorporating jogging, cycling, rowing, things like that. 1 to 2 times per week, 20 to 30 minutes per session, you'll be great. And finally, let's talk about mobility and flexibility. Now, some people use these 2 terms interchangeably, and they couldn't be more wrong. Now, mobility is the ability for a joint to move through an entire full range of motion without restriction or pain. Flexibility, on the other hand, is simply the ability for muscle to stretch and then return to its normal position. I can't tell you how important it is to understand the difference between the 2. Oftentimes, I'll get players coming back after the season, and they tell me that their sport coach tells them they need to work on their flexibility. So we take them through assessments, and then we realize, no, it's not the flexibility that they're lacking, it's the mobility of the joints. So instead of working static stretching, we work on mobility drills, we work on things that will open up the ranges of motion. For flexibility, it's actually very easy to increase your flexibility. Studies consistently show that resistance training results in similar increases in flexibility as static stretching, but they also benefit mobility and strength at end ranges. This is why we want to focus mostly on mobility and then let the strength training take care of the flexibility. And thank you for joining me on this episode today. Hopefully, you understand why general physical preparedness is critical for the success of an athlete. And if you still have questions on how to get better as an athlete, click here.